The primary purpose of this presentation is to explain why the Black Knight satellite has no real relationship to the ancient astronaut hypothesis, other than its alleged existence, which is used to delegitimate the credible pursuit of said hypothesis. An example of this can be found on the Ancient Aliens Debunked website. There you will find this article on the Black Knight satellite. As odd as it sounds, a large majority of purported evidence for the ancient alien theory is engraved in stone. Giant stone blocks, primitive stone carvings. If we're lucky, sometimes we get questionable metal artifacts. But why haven't the aliens left us anything, more alien? Like a giant ship full of giant robots. Why not a holographic message? Maybe metal engravings that don't corrode. Perhaps lasers or engineering diagrams, or an orb. Why is it that the proof of ancient aliens is mostly ambiguous stone artifacts? But there is one thing that isn't. A smoking gun for the ancient alien theory, if there ever was one, comes in the form of the Black Knight. The Black Knight is said to be an alien satellite in orbit around Earth, and it's been there for about 13,000 years or so, which means it's likely witnessed the Nuremberg space battle and should know when Planet X is due. Here we go. It's not only proof of paleo contact, it's also a modern-day UFO. As the viewer can see, the paleo contact debunkers are now connecting the Black Knight satellite to the ancient astronaut hypothesis. This task is made much easier for these debunkers when pop culture clickbaiters create posts on social media platforms touting the existence of this so-called satellite. So let's be clear on this. The archive does not know of any credible theorists, authors, or researchers in this field that believe the Black Knight satellite is connected to the hypothesis, or even exists for that matter. Most of you are familiar with the alleged history of the Black Knight satellite. It reaches back more than 100 years with its collection of unassociated historical events that are used to construct its legitimacy. There are basically 7 primary historical events that are utilized up to 1998 by the various sources that perpetuate this myth. In 1899, Nikola Tesla picks up a repeating radio signal that he believed originated from space. Note that during the 1920s, many ham radio operators reported picking up the same signal. In 1928, long-delay echoes, known as LDEs, received by a scientist in Oslo, Norway. In 1954, newspaper reports of 2 unknown satellites orbiting Earth. In 1960, newspaper report of U.S. Navy radar detecting a satellite that belonged neither to the U.S. or Soviet Union. In 1963, a greenish UFO was reported by astronaut Gordon Cooper during his 15th orbit on board Mercury 9. In 1973, Duncan Lunan asserted that the LDE data was a star chart pointing the way to Epsilon Boötis, and the satellite was transmitting a 12,600-year-old invitation. And finally, in 1998, Shuttle Endeavour on flight STS-88 takes photographs of a strange object. These photographs will become the primary visual evidence to support the concept of the Black Knight satellite. Sounds like a solid set of facts and evidence to support the existence of the Black Knight satellite, right? And one might even be excused for such a conclusion if those are the only facts presented. But when we examine the full set of facts associated with each historical event, you will hopefully realize what these clickbaiters are really up to. In May of 1899, Tesla moved to Colorado Springs, where he would investigate atmospheric electricity via his receivers. As Tesla observed unusual signals from his receiver, he concluded that these signals might actually be signals that have originated somewhere in space. He mentioned these signals in a letter to reporter Julian Hawthorne at the Philadelphia North American on December 8, 1899, and in a December 1900 letter about possible discoveries in the new century to the Red Cross Society, where he referred to messages from another world that read 1, 2, 3. In 1923, Tesla made it very clear where he thought the signals originated. "I have a deep conviction that highly intelligent beings exist on Mars," Tesla told a reporter from the Albany Telegram. "While experimenting in Colorado, I obtained extraordinary experimental evidence of the existence of life on Mars. I had perfected a wireless receiver of extraordinary sensitiveness, far beyond anything known, and I caught signals which I interpreted as meaning 1, 2, 3, 4. I believe the Martians used numbers for communication because numbers are universal." It has been suggested that he may have picked up interference from storms on Jupiter, but today astrophysicists believe that what he picked up were really likely pulsars, a highly magnetized rotating neutron star that emits a beam of electromagnetic radiation, formally discovered in 1968. Jørgen Hals, a Norwegian engineer, was experimenting with radio signals when he noticed that some of the signals would echo back to him several seconds after the initial transmission had ended. These signals became known as long delay echoes, or LDEs. In nearly 90 years since the discovery, no one has been able to conclusively explain what accounts for these signals. Currently, there are 5 probable explanations, any or all of which may be responsible for some LDEs. They are among 15 plausible explanations, but none of the explanations include something called a black night satellite. In 1954, newspapers ran stories citing a statement by UFO researcher Donald Kehoe that the U.S. Air Force had reported that 2 satellites orbiting Earth had been detected. Neither the Americans nor the Soviets had the ability to place an object into any kind of orbit at that time, yet the discovery of an Earth-orbiting satellite was reported in a couple of newspapers from that time. As it turns out, Kehoe was actually promoting his newly published book on UFOs, and this was his singular source. The Air Force officer cited was merely a guy who had seen a UFO once, but in no way corroborated the idea of unknown satellites orbiting Earth. Nevertheless, the event has been woven into the Black Knight satellite myth to add false credibility. In March of 1960, Time reported that there was an unusual object in polar orbit. Both superpowers had satellites in equatorial orbit, but polar orbit meant that the satellite could see every part of the Earth. In 1992, the Central Intelligence Agency declassified information suggesting that the object was connected to a covert Corona spy satellite. In 1960, the U.S. Discoverer Research Satellite program was actually a cover for the Corona project intended to photograph sites in the USSR. The mystery object reported was almost certainly an unexpectedly large piece of debris from the Discoverer 8 released when it jettisoned its film recovery capsule known as a bucket. Discoverer 8's bucket was lost as the satellite's eccentric orbit made it impossible to recover. The satellite itself burned up on re-entry in March 1960. The clickbaiters always leave out the 1992 revelation when presenting the Black Knight satellite myth. In 1963, Gordon Cooper was launched into space. On his final orbit, he reported seeing a glowing green object in front of his capsule in the distance moving towards his spacecraft. The Machia tracking station in Australia, which Cooper reported the object to, picked up this unidentified object on radar traveling east to west. NBC reported this, but after Cooper returned to Earth, the reporters were not allowed to ask Cooper about the unidentified object. The official explanation given to Cooper's sighting were high levels of carbon dioxide, which caused hallucinations. Gordon Cooper announced seeing many UFOs throughout his career. So when it was claimed that he saw green lights belonging to the Black Knight on his Mercury mission into Earth orbit, with ground control radar also allegedly picking up something inexplicable, it is often believed to be true. However, Cooper produced transcripts saying that on the Mercury flight he never saw anything. The story appears over and over, but there's no record of any such thing from NASA, from the radar station personnel, or from any contemporary source. When Duncan Lunan did his translation of the LDE data in 1973 and came up with the star map, he never had any thought of Black Knight or any other strange polar satellite. Moreover, Lunan later acknowledged that his method was not only unscientific, but that he had made outright errors and retracted it. So, despite today's pop culture story, there never has been any reasonable interpretation of anything connecting Epsilon Boötis to either a mysterious satellite or to a date of 12,600 years ago. This is the first mention of an actual age of the signal source. Many believers of this legend have decided to leave this fact out of the construction of the Black Knight satellite myth because Lunan retracted it. Yet, most will continue to prominently present the first part only. In an interview with space journalist James Oberg, Jerry Ross, one of NASA's most flown astronauts, related how a blunder during the construction of the ISS is the explanation for the unsettling photos of what appears to be the Black Knight. The STS-88 mission required 2 spacewalks, one of which involved wrapping 4 trunnion pins on the ISS node in thermal blankets to prevent heat leaks through the pin's exposed metal. According to Ross, while he and fellow astronaut Jim Newman were on an EVA installing these thermal blankets, one of them came loose from its tether. This was captured on video by other members of the STS-88 crew who can be heard on the video speculating as to whether a retrieval maneuver would be possible. In the end, this proved unworkable, and the object was photographed several times before falling out of orbit a week later, burning up in its descent to Earth. Here, watch for yourself.
Not enough zoom on this camera.
There, you can't reach it.
Yeah, a little bit too far. Let's see what it does later. Actually,
Can you see it?
yeah, it goes forward. It means that it will go up.
Yeah.
So it could be close to them in some time. Yeah, it comes back and go up.
Yeah.
So it could be in the reach limit.
The internet has fueled the metamorphosis of these events into the modern myth. But taking a close look at the set of facts used to construct this myth is really all that is required to understand why it holds no water. Once the full explanations of the elements are known, there exists no real evidentiary connections between them. Moreover, the name itself, Black Knight, is not referred to in any single event. Indeed, tracking down the first use of the phrase has proven extremely difficult. From 1958 through 1965, the United Kingdom operated a program named Black Knight intended to test various re-entry vehicles, but it never put anything into orbit. The archive believes it is safe to assume that the phrase Black Knight originated sometime after the 1998 STS-88 mission. Carefully researching each element of the myth also brings us to an undeniable conclusion. The age of about 13,000 years old is completely and utterly unfounded. The one and only traceable source, Lunan, who assigned an actual age, has since vehemently denied his findings and retracted the work. Must be another one of those cover-ups, huh? Listen up, folks. Everything does not need to translate into some grand conspiracy. There are plenty of more compelling theories than Black Knight satellite on which to focus. The archive presented this video because there has been an uptick in the proliferation of the Black Knight satellite myth, and the pop culturalists are injecting it into the ancient astronaut hypothesis. Does the object in the 1998 photograph exist? Short answer, yes. But it was a thermal blanket, not an alien satellite. Even with a cursory review, anyone that chooses objectivity can clearly determine there is nothing ancient about it. Unfortunately, these facts will do little for those individuals with cognitive dissonance. They will continue to ignore the full set of facts and focus only on what makes sense to them. The good news is that the archive will remain your bastion of common sense and will continue to call them out on their crap.